A lot of their activities take place later on in the day and even over the evening hours. In that respect, they are kind of a nocturnal animal. And so we just don't see them out and about all that often because they're usually out and about when we're not out. So, like I said, they are common, but they are kind of secretive and shy. We know of residents, they've lived their entire lives in the state of South Dakota, they've never seen a prairie rattlesnake at all. Okay, now, how many of you have actually seen a rattlesnake? A few of you have. And that's always a fascinating experience. If you are one of the lucky few that are going to have an interaction with this snake, in most cases you will probably hear the rattlesnake first before you see him. In most cases, not all, but in most. And if that is the situation, you hear that distinct buzzing sound, the best advice I can give you is to stop and freeze, locate where that sound is coming from. You might even get the chance to locate the snake, and then you can decide how you would like to react. Now, one show we asked the audience, well, what would you do if you heard the buzzing sound of a rattlesnake? The guy jumped right up and said, well, I would stop, drop, and roll. You didn't know any better than for a fighter, okay? On the ground, there's a rattlesnake down there. So, you want to stop or freeze whatever you're doing, listen for the sound, try to locate where that sound's coming from, or the snake itself, and then decide how you'd like to react. Now, I realize that people react a little bit differently. A lot of people, they hear that buzzing sound, their reaction involves running, and sometimes a lot of screaming. Okay? How many of you out there would run and scream? I'll be honest, I probably would do the same thing as well. Now, that doesn't mean that you're a chicken or a sissy. It's a natural response. It's a flight or fight response. You hear danger, you see danger, you want to get away as fast as you can. And just face it, for a lot of us, screaming things that kind of help the situation. It makes us feel better anyway. So running and screaming is fine as long as you know where the snake is and you know that you're running and screaming in the opposite direction. You don't want to run over the top of them, you'll get an uninvited bite, all right? So, some people will run and scream away. Other people, they will spot the rattlesnake, they'll step back a little ways and they'll observe it. Take pictures of it, run video, just watch it, and that's okay as long as you're outside the striking distance. The striking distance on a snake like this will be anywhere from about 1/2 to 2/3 his body length. And I realize most of us probably are not going to stretch a snake out, measure it, do a little bit of math, set it down, and step back. And so an easier method is if you come across a snake that you are unfamiliar with, give it at least 5 or 6 feet distance. There's really no snake in the U.S. that can strike over that distance easily. For some of you out there, you might be more comfortable with 5 or 6 feet, miles. All right? Okay? There's a third group of individuals that when they see the rattlesnake and they locate where it's at, guess what they like to do? They like to search for a stick and poke them, right? Now, I'll admit that's kind of fun. Sometimes you will get a very interesting reaction from the snake. And if you decide to go that route, you can't blame the snake for what happens next. That is actually how most people are bitten each year in the United States. Very rarely do we ever have a bite where a person accidentally steps on them. That's almost unheard of. It just doesn't happen all that often. Most bites are actually provoked because the person spotted the snake, but instead of running and screaming the opposite direction or backing up, they went ahead and they messed with it. They tried to kill it. They tried to pick it up. And we've heard all sorts of stories over the years. A guy says, well, I just wanted to pet the back of him. I just wanted to count the segments, see how old he was. I wanted to pick him up and cuddle with him. My girlfriend thought it was cool, Or my personal favorite, I wanted to kiss him on the top of the head. By the way, that's how you weed out the gene pool, okay? So, people actually do this. And of course, if you involve yourself in those types of activities, you're probably going to get bit. Now, most people that are bitten in the U.S. are actually young males between the ages of 16 and 25. We know how to get bit, right? Girls? It's an indication that testosterone and venomous snakes don't mix all that well. Alright? And there's usually another factor which contributes to those bites in that specific group, and that is usually alcohol. And lots of it. So, word of warning, if you ever come across a drunken rattlesnake, you leave it alone. They're really aggressive, and at that point, you're traveling in groups of 3 so avoid those drunken rattlesnakes. So alcohol, testosterone, and venomous snakes are a very bad combination no matter where you're at, okay? Now, fortunately, we can identify this snake very easily. It's the only snake in South Dakota that has a segment or an entire rattle at the tip of the tail. Now, there are harmless snakes in South Dakota that look similar to this, and some of them will even imitate a rattlesnake. Probably the best imitator is a bull snake. You approach a bull snake, you back him up into the corner, he has no place to go. A lot of times he will coil up He'll shake that tail rapidly. He'll elevate his body in that typical rattlesnake striking pose. He'll flatten his head out. He'll produce a buzzing sound, not from a rattle, but from a flap of skin on the inside of the mouth. It's identical to the sound of a rattlesnake. So if you come across a snake that looks like this, you want to make sure it's a rattlesnake from a safe distance. Look at the overall shape of that tail. That tail is rounded like your thumb. That will be a rattlesnake, and of course you want to leave it alone. If that tail is pointed like a toothpick, that will be a harmless snake in the state of South Dakota, and that will always hold true. So if you don't remember anything else from this show, please remember that. Put that in the back of your minds, because you might be outdoors this week. You come across a snake that looks like a rattlesnake. You want to make sure it's a rattlesnake. Look at the shape of the tail. Now, if you're not familiar or sure what it is always best just to leave it alone. Okay? What are we supposed to get if we count the segments on that rattle? Yeah, we're supposed to get the age, right? Do you know that's a myth? Not at all true. The only thing that you're going to get is a snake bite. So don't do it. Okay? A lot of times people think, well, each segment goes 1 year of its life, so you count them all up. That's how old the snake is. Well, actually, that snake will gain a segment every time he sheds his skin. He can shed his skin up to 12 times a year. There's a flip side to this. The material that rattle is made out of is called keratin. It's the same stuff as your fingernails. So just like your fingernails have a tendency to chip off and break off from time to time, parts of the rattle can do the exact same thing. So it's not even an accurate way of telling how many times this snake has shed its skin. So don't go counting the segments, especially if it's still attached to the snake. Another common myth out there, this is one that always surprises me when I hear it, and that is rattlesnakes supposedly are required to rattle first before they bite you. I heard this. You're like, rattlesnake's not buzzing, reach down there and pick it up. But as soon as he starts buzzing, you better put it down. That's a very common myth, and I'm here to tell you it's not true, okay? The way I like to think of it, there's really no animal on the planet that has to turn around and ask his tail for permission for reaches out there and bites you. And that's certainly the case with a rattlesnake. So you might get a rattlesnake that buzzes and then strikes at you. You might get one that will just as soon bite you and warn you a couple hours later on. You might get one that will do nothing but rattle. You might get one that does nothing but strike. So the two are completely unrelated, but that is another common myth. You can take all the myths about rattlesnakes, and we're not going to go into any more of these. You can literally take all the myths about rattlesnakes, all the stories that are out there. You can fill several volumes with them, because they've definitely been the center of a lot of fascination and tall tales and folklore, especially out here in the West. It is a very interesting snake, but he deserves our respect. And so, like I said, if you do come across him, just give him plenty of space, observe him, take videos of him, but please do not mess with him, especially if you are on public property. There's no reason to do that. Okay, this is the last snake I have for you, and I just want to end by saying that a lot of the snakes that you saw us work with today, they weren't too overly aggressive. They're easy to handle, but on occasion, we will pull out a rattlesnake or maybe a cobra that's a little more aggressive. And after you've done shows for a while, you start to read the audience very well. So let's say I pull out a rattlesnake, he's flopping all over, striking every which direction. A lot of times I'll look out at the audience, and people are sitting there thinking, man, is this guy even qualified to do that? Or, what is he going to do if it looks like he's going to get bit? And so I just want to put your fears aside. If you're wondering that today, how would we avoid a bite? I just want to let you know that we are trained here at the Reptile Gardens by some of the best snake handlers, probably in the United States, maybe even the world. I won't go that far, but in the United States. And so we are trained how to handle these snakes. Every snake acts a little bit differently. We're trained very well. There's a lot of safety protocol in each and every one of these shows. But there is one trick that I always like to use, and it always ensures that I never get bit at a show. Let's say, for example, we'll pull out a big rattlesnake. He's just flopping all over, striking every which direction, foaming at the mouth. He just wants to bite me, which that really doesn't happen. But anyways, he wants to bite me. Let's say I get backed up into a corner, right? Looks like he's to bite me. All I have to do is take my trusty snake up here. Okay, see how I have a little hook at the end? It's basically a golf club or a piece of metal. Nice little hook there. You take that trusty snake up, you scoop up that aggressive snake wherever you can, it's kind of like this. Well, actually, it's more like, I guess it's more like this, really. And you hook that snake up, and you basically take him and flick him over the glass, and it is 100% effective. I've never been bit. At this point, we usually have your money, and usually give you a free pass afterwards. This is the last thing I have for you. They're making an announcement for the Gator Show. If you've not seen that, head on down that sidewalk. We'll meet you there here shortly. Thanks for coming out. You've been a great group.